coming. Hope you had a good conference so far. But this is probably the best one to see. So before I get started, I just want to ask, are there any people here who think of themselves as data people? Analytics, marketing? Good. All right. So hopefully this talk speaks to you, and then maybe later to come back to PhD. So today, I'm going to tell you a story. Yeah, that's not true. The data is going to tell you a story, and I'm here to impress upon you just how valuable Sitecore's data is. Because most of you have probably never seen it, and so I'm going to show you a lot of it, and try to get you over that edge of just thinking about Sitecore as a really valuable tool to give you insights. And by insights, I mean actionable intelligence. So Mark Stiles, I work for Lear, the Boston area. I've been in the community for quite a while. I have a background in computer engineering and data science, which is just to say I like building things and I'm pretty good with numbers. But today what I want to talk about is Sitecore Analytics. And what I'm going to do is start with an anecdote. It's probably a familiar story, maybe you can relate. But I was working with a client and we were working on an upgrade. Right, I'm sure you've all been in an upgrade. That's not the interesting part. But the client that I'm working with they're a content producer. They're not selling anything, so what their metrics are a little different. And what they care about is they want to impact, they want to be thought leaders, they want people to be influenced. They want to find people who are influential and they want to reach them to help spread their audience and spread their message. And so they have tens of thousands of pages. They have 200 gigabytes of analytic data, which may not necessarily seem like a lot, but it's not really a lot of time that they're actually capturing either. And so they spent a lot of time and a lot of money investing in their analytics, and they have custom contact assets and goals and campaigns. And so all these things that they've invested in over the years, when we get to the end of this project, and I tell them we have to rebuild the reporting database. And when I do the numbers and I say, okay, it's either going to take you 4 months to rebuild this reporting database, or you scale it up, costs you not an insignificant amount of money, and you can get it done in a day. And they quickly turn to me and they say, don't bother, we don't need it. And so, I don't know if you've ever anybody been on either side of this conversation where you do the upgrade? Yes, right, now they do it. And so I was perplexed. I just didn't understand. How could they invest so much time and not need this at all? And so I dug in and I asked them, and I was like, how is this possible? But it turns out they're actually siphoning off all their analytic data into another system through data exchange format. Actually, they don't siphon all the data, they only get like a little bit of it. And another thing stuck to me too, which was like, I have a background working with data, and I'm thinking to myself, 4 months. 200 gigs is technically big data, but it's not 4 months. You know what I mean? Retraining ChatGPT. So it doesn't make sense to me. These two problems just don't sit with me well. So I started looking into it, and I really want to know why it is that they're stuck in this place. And so there's two things that I found that were really kind of fundamental problems. And one is that the way Sitecore stores the analytic data is compressed. And so you actually have to go, and it's all in like one column. But there's 14 different tables like this, and you have to expand them all. Because otherwise you can't actually calculate anything. And that's why the reporting takes so long to rebuild. But the other problem, which wasn't really obvious to me at first, which is that the UI itself is built in a language called Speak. It was a proprietary language from Sitecore. It wasn't documented very well, and as far as I know, there's a vanishingly small number of people who know it. And so these two things really kind of prevented a lot of innovation in this space. Because the people who are data people, who need this data, and the application people, there's this huge gap between the two people and the knowledge that they need to share. And so, what I did is I solved this problem because I was just so annoyed by it. I'm not really here to talk about this, I just want to promote this idea. But the posters, if you saw any, grab some on the way out. I generated the image with AI. But it's called Sitecore Data Tools, and all it does is there's two basic elements of SQL. It pulls and extracts all the data out of the two XDB databases and your content database, and puts it into one warehouse. And then the other part is the DBT, which is also SQL, and it rebuilds this data from all the raw data into business objects that you can then attach your business intelligence platforms to and query it. And so, again, I'm not here to really talk that much about it, but it's on GitHub, it's called Sitecore Data Tools. I just want you to think of this as a solved problem. Sitecore Analytics is actually really valuable. Please stop throwing it away. And so what I want to do is walk you through this journey, because there's a data journey, and we've kind of got stuck in the middle here. Data is really just what you have in your database. And that's fine, everybody has a little bit of data. Once you start plotting it, now you have some information, and over time, as you build up this information, you start to gain a little bit of knowledge, and that's really where we've been. And we're kind of stuck at that place. But what we really need to do is move past, we need to get to those insights, because the insights are what tell you whether or not what you're doing is effective. And it helps you make better decisions, spending your time in better places. Beyond that, if you're trying to get to wisdom and impact, you're talking about taking that power of those insights and actually using them in your strategy. You're talking about taking that data, training models, and using those machine learning models to actually affect a change in your personalization and your automation. Those two things, for those of you who do know me, I didn't actually build any machine learning models yet, so sorry, but that's my next talk, come to that one. But what we're trying to do here is, so CDP right now is kind of like the standard bearer for the data model. And so what I'm trying to do is bend XDB toward that same model. So if you're using one, using the other, maybe you could transfer your data, or at least you understand the two systems in the same way. But what we're trying to do is use those to feed them into your Power BI, or Looker, or Tableau, whatever it is, so you can get that information out and you start interrogating, really learn something. The other things we want to take that, build those models, feed it to personalize. Now you can create a rule that says, if this person's score is above or below this, show them this content. But that score is actually a prediction. And so you're feeding that to the model, gives you a prediction, now you're using machine learning. We can also take it, and I haven't really talked to the stream team yet, but I'm pretty sure you can take a function and give it to stream and say, when somebody asks for something like this, call the function, take it back, format it in this way. And now you're starting to get analytics through a chat interface back in Sitecore. And now we're integrating the data, we're getting a lot of value out of it. We're not actually that far off from having all these things, like this close. So expect that probably in the next year or so. And what we're doing, when I'm talking about data model, what I'm saying is when we pull out the data from the database, we have three different elements. So at the core, the kind of atomic level, are the events. And the events are like a page view. They are personalization events, they're campaign events. All these little things that you can do on your website. You can create custom events. When you put those together, you have an interaction. So you open your browser, you click a bunch, all these things happen, you close your browser, that's your interaction. But now you have a sense of a timeline. And you take all of those, you roll those up, and now you have a contact. And now you have a sense of a lifetime. And so these are all really interesting concepts. They have all kinds of different metrics at different levels, and you can compare them between different contacts, different interactions. But there's so many different things you can learn once you have it in this shape. And so we're going to start looking at the events first, because what I think is, at the atomic level, what I want to show you is something really interesting, which is, the outside of the data. So this is just information, this is not insights, but this is kind of the thing you would start with. I want to give you a sense of just where this data is. I have a sample data set that I was working with from this client. And so the data was from 2023 to 2024. It was a year, 8 months, and 21 days, over 19 million events, almost 6 million interactions, over 4 million contacts, 2 campaigns, which seems in that list an unusually low number, and 10 million points of engagement value was created. How many people remember this? It's basically the hello world of Sitecore Analytics, right? And so, as I was getting the data, and I really wanted to make sure that I knew I had what I thought I had, and so I tried to rebuild this. Just as to say, can I do at least what they were doing? And I did it. And at that point, then I realized, it doesn't really tell me anything. There's a bunch of pages that got hit. I don't know what pages they were. I don't know, how many people that was. And so I started to think to myself, I really need to rebuild this. I need to take all that data that I know is there, that no one else knows is there, and put it all into this chart. And when you see it, I think you'd be surprised just how much data Sitecore is actually tracking. And so this is the same plot with all the data. And it's a lot. I'm gonna walk you through it, so don't feel like you have to get through this in the next 3 seconds before I switch slides. This right here is the page view. So that was the original bar from the first graph. This is personalization. So if you kind of can tell a lot of the bars, there's actually a lot of personalization compared to the page view events. They were doing a pretty good job of like creating rules and applying them all over the place. These are the goals. Not a lot. There's some, you can notice them. That's pretty good. You want to see those go up. But at least we have a target. And then there's these 3 massive bars of errors. I bet you probably didn't even know Sitecore was tracking that stuff. But they are. I bet you this client knew before 3 months had passed that they had these massive amounts of errors on their site, which I'm not saying it caused that because causation is kind of hard to prove, but I'm willing to take a bet, a small bet on that one. Maybe that hurt that visitorship. Off to the right here is another interesting thing, these red bars. What you're looking at here is profiling. They put in place profiling. You're seeing it actually play out in this chart right here. And to me, as a person, if I was put all that work in and I saw this, I would be like, okay, wow, it is working. I'm seeing it. I'm getting that feedback. I know what's happening. Then there's engagement value. So this is from the original chart too. But I added in contacts. And what's really interesting about having these 2 lines is this point right here, where they deviate. I didn't have any more additional contacts at that point. I had a lot more engagement value. Why is that? It's a deep question, but I do have an answer for that, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But take a look at that month, right? So that's May of 2024. But this is the type of thing that I'm saying, like, put together, this is actual insight. You're looking at something that you can say, this tells a story. You learn something from actually looking at this. I have a much better idea of all the things that are going on in site now that I can see all of what they're tracking. So I'm going to take a turn. What I want to do is talk about campaign events, because campaigns are really something special both in marketing but also in Sitecore. And so campaign is just a thing you're trying to track. Something special, maybe you're putting money behind it, you're pushing it on a channel, maybe it's a promotional ad, whatever it is. But when you go and you create those pages and you work out media and you write that copy and you get those approvals, all that was work that you did. That work that you did can then be tracked and compared to the amount of clicks that you got. That's exposure. So how much work you did to how much if you don't have a lot of exposure, maybe it's not worth it, right? All the additional clicks and events that people started to go and click through your site that you wouldn't have gotten without this campaign, that's your full reach. And so these 2 metrics, I'm going to use these and I'm going to show you something really interesting. There's something I kind of created out whole cloth, but this is what I'm talking about. When you have access to the data, you can do these types of things. You create these types of metrics, and you start to really learn things. And so this is the 2 campaigns that they had. Kind of neatly overlapped each other. But you notice that the blue one is about twice as large as the purple one. And when you look at the numbers, it kind of bears out that. It's almost 3,000 points of engagement value, about 1,400, about twice as many contacts, except when you get down to the percentage of contacts hitting the goals. They're almost the same in that regard. It's just that the blue one is kind of scaled up. So why that is, I don't necessarily know, but if you were a marketer who put this in place, you would. But the most interesting thing, actually, on the chart on the bottom left, you should take a note of that month. That's the month when that sudden spike in that engagement value hit. This campaign was effective. You didn't even see the campaign events on that last chart because they were so small compared to everything else. But it actually did show an effect in the engagement value, which means they were effective. So in a way, we did learn even more than we thought we knew by just continuing on down this road. But the really interesting thing is on the bottom right. And so these are the exposure and the reach values, and the one on the left is actually the one from the blue campaign. And so the one from the purple campaign was actually more effective for the amount of time that you put in. So whatever they did on the purple campaign, even though it wasn't as big of a campaign or didn't have as many visitors, they got more value for as much time as they put in. That's insight. So they can go back and they can look at that and they can say, I know I did something different there. Was it a different channel? Did I pay a different amount? I don't know what it is exactly, but they would know. And they would know that they would be like, I'm going to do more of that because that's what worked. And that's insight. And that's my hook. I'm going to keep hitting you with that all day. And so, so now I'm going to jump to interactions, because even though I have a million more plots, I don't have the time, but I just want to get to it. But the interactions is another view of this, right? So we're going to jump into this. I'm going to show you the standard information that you get from the averages. And so from all the interactions that we have, there's a minute is about the average duration that people stay on the site. 2.2 pages per minute, which is kind of fast, but not too fast. 1.2 items, so they mostly read about one item, and 1.5 page views. Page views and items are different because if you go to the home page, that's one item view. If you hit refresh, so it's 2 page views, one item. And so when you see those two diverge, what you're seeing is people rereading, which is actually another interesting metric you can keep track of. And there is more, I'll show you that. But right now, when you look at that, you're saying, okay, well, it's not really that great of a number, right? There are not too many people staying, they're not staying for very long. That's the problem with just information. It doesn't really tell you that. But as we dig in, you're going to see that that's really not the truth. And so these next few plots, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the same plot, but I'm going to zoom in different areas. Because what I want to do is understand the whole total of all the interactions that happened on this website for that year. And so this is kind of a complicated plot. There are 4 dimensions here, but on the y-axis and the vertical axis is the page duration, so how long people stayed. On the x-axis, that's how fast people clicked. And the color that you're looking at, the higher the color, the more page views, and the larger the point is the more pages they viewed. And where those diverge, I said, so when it's a small dot, it's a yellow color, that means they were rereading. And so there's quite a bit of that, you'll see that in the arc. But what's really interesting at this point is that I've zoomed in way on the high pages per minute. So people who click really fast, over 60 pages per minute, which is like, after you drink like 4 cups of coffee or something, I don't know, right? But what's interesting is this point right here, people aren't really staying for more than a minute, which means they click really fast and then they leave. And what that means to me is that there isn't bots hitting the site, slamming it and ruining all the traffic with noise. So that's a good data point right there. When I take it and zoom in another level, what I want to know is people who stay for a really long time. And what's interesting about this is that people who stay for a really long time, they don't click very fast. Which means they're sitting and they're reading. They're actually reading. And that's really good too. Again, it confirms that this is actually probably a more healthy audience. And then another one where item count is high. So they're actually reading a lot of different things. And so there's 2 things going on in this one, and there's a pivot point right here. And on the bottom, you'll notice that it's kind of light and that opacity is kind of thin. That means that there's not very many people that are just doing that. They're not, a lot of the volume of the traffic isn't just clicking very fast. They are actually staying. There are a good number of people reading for a good long time. So that, again, is a confirmation for me that this is a really healthy audience and good traffic. I don't have to continue to do filtering and cleaning it up. This is good, valuable data. But what I want to do is, now I'm going to get to the core of it, because I looked at the big outside picture, now I want to trim the outside and look at the inside. I want to get rid of the people who didn't read very much, who read too fast, and didn't stay long enough. And when I do that, I trim way down. So you notice that there was almost 6 million interactions down to 80,000. There was over 4 million contacts down to 56,000. That's a lot smaller of a group of people you're talking about. But of those groups, 673 of them are known, meaning they submitted their email and we know who they are and we can reach out to them. But their average speed here, that page per minute, is actually half a page per minute. So now when we focus in on the real core audience of this audience, their metrics are much better. They're not as mediocre as they kind of seem on the surface. They read about 5 pages in real pages, distinct pages, and they stay for about 16 minutes, which isn't too bad. But what I really want to do is I want to zoom in on this spot, because this spot is the super reader. These people stay for over 100 minutes. And so I want to know what's going on there. That, to me, I was like, 100 minutes on a website, right? So when you zoom in, you're down to 100 interactions, 78 contacts. 5 of them are known. 2 of them work for the company, so they're probably just proofreading. But 3 of them don't. And so at this point, this is where I would recommend you go contact those people. What are they? Who are they? What do they work? What do they do? Why are they reading so much? because that's what would help you target these people if you understood who they were and why they're coming, and find more of them. Because these are the people you really want. They read everything. And their metrics bear that out. They read even slower. They read even more items. They stay for 151 minutes on average. These are like the golden people. Every personalization rule should be like, give them a coupon. I don't know, they don't sound like it, but something interesting. Tell them about new content that they haven't read or topics that they like. Now I'm going to turn to contacts. Again, I'll show you some of the metrics. And then I have another kind of interesting thing I want to show you, but this one I'm going to do a little bit differently. Assume I did the same thing where I look at the outside and go to the inside, but I want to show you a different story about the contacts, because it just goes to show you just how unexpected the type of things that you find when you go looking for something. It just kind of blows my mind. And so, again, all this metrics, all this data that you probably never knew is so valuable. I'm going to show you one more time. And so for the contact averages, they come for about 1.4 interactions total on average. And so they stay for about 3.8 days. Maybe they'll come once here, once there, or a short period of time. They have about an average of 19 points of engagement value, not very much. 1.3 items viewed for 2-page views, so again, they came to one page, maybe came back and reread it. Not great numbers, but again, we haven't really looked into it. One interesting thing that I wanted to go through, because I took this course, and it was a really interesting thing about marketing analytics, which was a customer lifetime value. And I'm not going to pretend I can calculate the customer lifetime value for companies. It's a really complicated thing. But because we have a lifetime and we do have an engagement value, what I'm proposing is we can measure a customer lifetime engagement value. We're just not necessarily based in finance, which is what a customer lifetime value is, but it is a relative value of the value that the person has had on your site. And you can use that as targeting. And so the average for this company, for this audience is 19 points of engagement value, 3.8 days, which puts their score on average at 73. That's not necessarily points or anything specific, but it is a relative value. And I'll show you this in a second. But here, when I split up the group between known and unknowns, people who submitted their emails, there's only a couple thousand people who've ever submitted their emails to this company, of the over 4 million people. But if you look at the engagement value for them, it's 5 times as high. 109 points. They stay for 265 days on average. And they rack up 29,000 engagement value points. And so this is probably one of the easiest rules you'll ever write, because differentiating 68 from 29,000 to target those people is probably, there's a lot of room for error there. It's pretty easy to hit that group, because that value is so distinct, but they are really valuable. And that's really interesting, because for them, this is what they want to try to do, right? They're spending all this time and effort. There's so many more metrics that they can hit. And so this is the last story I'm going to hit you with. And so at first you're going to, why are you showing me this? It shows me nothing. But it doesn't. It actually shows you a lot. It just doesn't, it's not an insight yet. But the bar, if you look at the bar, it reaches up to about 600. And this is the number of interactions a contact has. So for some reason, even most of the interactions, or most of the contacts have 600 interactions over this year span, which is 365 days, which if you do the math, is a reasonable amount of interactions for all your contacts. But when you look all the way over here to the right, 7,000, who is hitting this site 7,000 sessions in a year? That's a lot. I'm on that right now, I'm still on it, And so I want to look into it. I got the contact, I figured it was, call me 55, 6,700 interactions over this period of a year, 20,000 page views. But they only read 3 distinct pages. And so at this point, in their choice of browsers, Firefox, and their operating system is Windows, and at this point I'm like perplexed. I have no idea how this is still possible. I feel like I've made an error or something. It's time to change my career. I don't know what I'm doing. But I don't let it go. I just keep digging, because I'm going to figure this out. And so I look at it by month. And they're averaging about 1,000 sessions per month. I'm like, how is that possible? Look at it by the day. Almost 50 a day. But it's not like a bot, which is still my concern because it's hitting it this much. It must be a bot, right? But it's kind of organic. It's not even every day. It's up, it's down, it's all over the place. And so I go back to my other metrics and I set pages per minute. If they're clicking fast, if it's a bot, it'd be fast, easy to detect. If it's a person, it's probably relatively slow, no problem. I plot it out. It's all over the place. I still can't make any sense of it. It doesn't even behave like a person. It's not a single person. And at that point it hits me. It's not a single person. For some reason they're tracking this contact. Go back to the database, get all the IPs. I go reverse lookup, and it turns out there's one name for all of them. It's a corporate VPN. And I realized something, which is I created a metric that can help me determine the difference between an individual and a company. And that's when I started to really think, okay, now I'm on something. Now I've got to plot this max number of interactions per day. So I do. And I plot it over the interaction space. And so what I'm looking at is, you see two things here. You probably don't yet, but if you stare at it long enough, which is wild, you'll see two different things happening here. And one is this arm that kind of stretches out to the right. And what you need to know is the vertical bar here, the y-axis, which is the max interactions per day, is a relative metric for the size of a company. Right? You can't hit 120 max, pages per minute if you don't have enough people to do it. So it's a relative, just the number of people coming to your site, that's the size. So these smaller companies, they tend to come and they read a lot, which is the size of that point you're seeing. And so they're coming and they're smaller companies, but they read a good amount. And what I'm guessing is these are probably companies that consume this media for, maybe they produce their own media from it. Maybe it's a news organization or something like that. I don't know, but what's interesting here is this fellow over here is still hanging out, but he's actually kind of an outlier even in his own group. And what's really interesting is when you look at this bar. So the companies that are kind of larger, they actually don't read as much. That point is really small. E55 kind of fits more in with him, so it's really weird. But what that means is that that small point means they reread the same pages over and over and over. Then it hits me. The reason that they're doing that is because somebody came into work, they read this article, it was about that company, they shared it with their coworkers, they shared it with their boss, they spread it around, the whole company read this thing, and that's why you have so many people reading a handful of articles. And what you're looking at is influence. This is people coming, they're sharing it with people, that's influence. If you remember all the way back to the beginning, the thing that this company really cared about was influence. They wanted to reach people who would push their message and share it with other people. And I found them right there. Couldn't believe how excited I was. And so when they first told me that they just didn't care about this at all, don't worry about it, I was just like kind of stunned and I just didn't know what to say. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized that all the data really has so many insights because it tells you about what's happening on your site, how effective your time is being spent, whether or not you're reaching the audience that you were hoping to reach in the first place. These are super important things that you need to know to be able to manage these websites properly. And so that's really the end of their story. And what I want to leave you with is this. Whether your data is in XDB or CDP or anywhere else, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you discover your story in the data. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your conference, your great audience. Have a poster.
There's questions, I guess.
Yeah, you have a question?
Raise the hand and I'll give you mic, because we also will do a recording for YouTube. We'll put it online later on, a couple of months later, for people who did it.
So when you recreated the experience analytics dashboard with the multiple color bars and everything, what tool did you use to do that?
So I was using Python. I'm a programmer
Okay.
by trade. That's my
So you took in multiple data sources from Sitecore in order to do that, I'm assuming?
So, right, there's multiple different tables that I'm pulling from. So I basically created 3 main tables. And there's more I created, but those were the main ones that I pulled the events. So the bar chart is the events, the contacts was the one line, and the engagement value is just another pivot on the event table.
Okay, were the errors from the logs?
No, they were from the event table. They're events.
Oh,
Exactly. Never knew they would track all those things. Yeah. Anyone else?
When they track the error, you can actually see the page that has been written before the error, so you can also get an insight into which page is actually failed.
Yeah. It references the
Yeah.
pages.
Thank you. How much time it took you to investigate and find the solution?
I've been working on this since October. But I did finish it about a month ago, so I've been polishing it since then.
Okay, and GitHub repository you showed before is to install the package and see the same analytics.
Yeah, so there's another video that I have that I did user group that explains how it all works. But basically, there's the loading scripts. So when you get the solution, it's a loading scripts which just pulls it out of all the databases. There's transform scripts. That's the DBT part. That once you have all the raw tables, builds them back into new tables. And then there's the Python scripts to visualize it. But it doesn't have to be Python scripts. So to your question, I did build it in Python, but you can build it in, you could rebuild it in like Power BI or anything. It's just querying the tables that are there. Anyone else?
everything that we saw was that all Python?
Yeah, and so it's in the code. There's actually the source code I have. I put all the plots. There's actually a million more that I didn't show that are all in there. There's like maps and core plot maps and some other, just a million other plots. I just didn't fit the story, so I'll do that. But it's all in the code. You can reuse it.
That's it. Okay. Thank you, Mike, for an inspiring talk. It was interesting to elaborate and hear about it.
Thank you.
How about the giveaway materials?